He had always loved his garden. There was something comforting about digging into the earth, feeling the soil slip through his fingers and watching tiny sprouts push their way up toward the sun. The backyard had always been a place where he could think, a place to escape the constant hum of life. That afternoon, the sky was a soft, pale blue, and the air carried the faint smell of flowers in bloom. Birds called to one another from the trees, and a light breeze rustled through the leaves. Everything felt calm, almost too calm, as if the world had paused just for him. He wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned on his shovel, taking a moment to look at the patch of earth he had been working on. It was the corner near the old oak tree, a spot he had avoided for years. The tree's roots spread like a network of veins beneath the surface, making it difficult to plant anything there. But today, for reasons he couldn't explain, he had decided to dig. There was no rush, no pressing reason, just a sudden urge to see what lay beneath that corner of his garden. His shovel hit something hard almost immediately, and he froze. For a moment, he thought it was just a large stone or a stubborn root, but as he brushed away the soil, the shape became clearer. It wasn't a stone, and it certainly wasn't a root. The object was rectangular, and it was made of wood. His heart began to race, and a strange chill ran down his spine. He knelt down and ran his fingers along the edges of the wooden box. It was old, very old, and the wood had darkened with age. He hesitated, staring at it, unsure whether to call someone or investigate himself. The garden, which had felt so peaceful moments ago, now seemed different. The gentle rustling of the leaves sounded louder, sharper, almost like whispers. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if they too sensed something unusual. He felt a tight knot in his chest, a mixture of fear and curiosity. It was strange how an object buried under the earth could change the feeling of an entire place. Yet there it was, staring back at him from beneath the soil, demanding attention. He knelt on the damp ground, brushing away more dirt carefully. Every scoop of earth revealed more of the object's outline. The corners were reinforced with iron, rusted from years of exposure, and the surface bore strange, almost faded markings. He couldn't read them, but they made the object feel even more mysterious. The air smelled of wet soil and something older, something forgotten for decades. He swallowed hard, his mind racing with possibilities. Was it a forgotten storage box? Some old family heirloom? Or something far stranger? As he continued to dig, the object became clearer, and it was impossible to ignore the truth. It was a coffin. The realization hit him like a cold wave, making his hands tremble and his breath catch. He sat back on his heels, staring at it in disbelief. How could something like this end up in his garden? His mind filled with questions he didn't have answers to. Who had been buried here? Why had no one mentioned it before? And why now, of all times, had he stumbled upon it? He ran his hands over the surface, feeling the worn wood beneath his fingers. There was no sign of a name or any indication of who might be inside. It was simple, unadorned, yet its presence was heavy, almost oppressive. The sun was still shining, and yet the spot felt dark, as if the coffin itself absorbed the light. He felt a strange mixture of fear and fascination, the kind of feeling that made it hard to look away even when every instinct screamed to stop. For several minutes, he just sat there staring at the coffin, trying to decide what to do. The thought of calling the authorities crossed his mind, but a part of him hesitated. What would he say? I found a coffin in my backyard? Who would believe him? And what if it had been there for decades? Could it disturb something that was meant to stay buried? The questions kept coming, pressing on his mind, making it almost impossible to think clearly. He took a deep breath and decided to inspect it more closely. Slowly, carefully, he lifted the edge of the lid. It was heavier than he expected, the wood thick and solid. His hands shook, but his curiosity pushed him forward. Inch by inch, he raised it, revealing the inside. What he saw made him freeze in a mix of shock and disbelief. It wasn't what he had expected at all. The contents of the coffin were not what anyone would normally expect. There was no body, no sign of death. Instead, there were objects, carefully placed as if someone had deliberately created a hidden time capsule. Letters tied with string, old photographs, a small wooden box, and even a diary lay neatly inside. Everything was preserved almost perfectly, despite the years underground. He picked up the diary, its cover worn but intact. The handwriting inside was elegant, flowing, and immediately recognizable. His grandmother's handwriting. He felt a sudden pang of emotion, a connection to someone he had loved and lost years ago. As he flipped through the pages, words began to reveal a story he had never known. His grandmother had written about secrets, about people she had helped and protected, and about a life that had been far more complicated than he had ever imagined. It was as if she had left this hidden treasure just for him, knowing he would one day uncover it. The letters told stories of courage, fear, and love. Some were addressed to people he didn't know. Others seemed to be messages to himself, though he had never read them before. He realized that the coffin was not a burial site in the traditional sense. It was a secret archive, a collection of memories, confessions, and warnings meant to be discovered at the right time. The more he looked, the more he understood that this discovery was not just about the past, it was about his family, his history, and perhaps even his own future. For hours, he sat in the garden, surrounded by the earth and the hidden contents of the coffin. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. The gentle hum of life continued around him, but he felt a world apart, suspended between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Each letter, each photograph seemed to pull him deeper into a story that had been waiting for decades to be told. He realized that the garden, which had always been a place of peace, had now become a place of revelation, a doorway into secrets long buried and long forgotten. As night began to fall, he carefully closed the coffin, making sure everything was exactly as he had found it. He sat back and took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. Fear, curiosity, sadness, and wonder all fought for dominance in his mind. He knew that what he had found would change everything, not just his understanding of his family, but his understanding of himself. The garden, once a simple escape, had become a bridge between the past and the present, a place where hidden truths waited quietly beneath the surface, ready to be discovered. That night, he barely slept. The coffin and its contents replayed in his mind, each letter and photograph demanding attention, each word from his grandmother echoing through his thoughts. He knew that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that would take time to fully understand. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a strange sense of peace, too. A feeling that finally, a piece of the past had been uncovered, a story waiting to be told, and that he was now a part of it. The next morning, he woke up with the memory of the coffin pressing heavily in his mind. The sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it couldn't shake the images that had settled in his thoughts overnight. He felt a strange mix of anticipation and unease, the kind that keeps your stomach tense and your mind buzzing. He couldn't stop thinking about the diary, the letters, and the photographs. They had been there, hidden beneath the soil for decades, waiting for someone to find them. And now, that someone was him. He made a simple breakfast, barely tasting it, his mind wandering back to the objects in the coffin. Something about the way they had been carefully arranged, almost reverently, suggested that this was more than a random collection. Someone had wanted these things preserved, wanted them remembered, and as he sipped his coffee, he realized that the handwriting in the diary was unmistakably familiar. He had seen it 100 times on birthday cards, on letters, on envelopes tucked into drawers. It belonged to his grandmother, a woman who had always seemed quiet and ordinary, but who now revealed herself to be far more complex and courageous than he had ever imagined. He decided to go back to the garden. The morning was crisp, the air carrying the smell of earth and early blooms. He knelt by the old oak tree, brushing the soil gently from the coffin. It was almost like opening a door into another time, a time when his grandmother's life had been filled with secrets he had never known. He lifted the lid carefully again, and the letters and diary lay there as if nothing had changed since the day they had been buried. He picked up the diary first, running his fingers along the worn cover, and then began to read. The first pages were filled with dates and names, many of which he didn't recognize. But as he read further, the story began to take shape. His grandmother had lived through difficult times, times that were filled with fear and uncertainty. She wrote about helping people in ways he had never known, protecting them from danger and making decisions that carried enormous risk. He was struck by the calm, deliberate way she described everything, even the moments that must have been terrifying. It was almost as if she had written these words not just to remember, but to teach, to prepare someone, him, for the day they might be found. The letters added another layer to the story. They were addressed to different people, some of whom he recognized from old family photos. Others were addressed to strangers, people whose names had faded from memory, but whose lives had clearly been important to her. One letter described a hidden room in an old building. Another mentioned a safe place in the countryside, and yet another spoke of a promise she had made to someone she had never met. As he read, he realized that his grandmother had been living a double life. To the world, she had seemed ordinary, a gentle presence in the family. But beneath that calm exterior, she had carried secrets and responsibilities that would have been overwhelming for anyone. The photographs were equally revealing. Some showed his grandmother with people he didn't recognize, standing in unfamiliar places with expressions that suggested both happiness and worry. Others showed items that matched the descriptions in the letters: a key, a locket, a small bundle of papers. It was like piecing together a puzzle, each item revealing more of a hidden life that had been carefully concealed. He felt a growing sense of admiration mixed with awe. This was someone he had thought he knew completely, yet now he saw her in an entirely new light. As he continued to read, he found a letter addressed to him, written long before he was born. The words were gentle but firm, almost like instructions. She wrote about the importance of keeping secrets safe, of understanding the weight of responsibility, and of learning from the past. She spoke of courage, of honesty, and of the need to act with care. He felt a shiver run through him. It was as if she had known he would find the coffin, as if she had planned this moment all along. He spent hours that morning in the garden, reading and rereading the diary and letters, absorbing every detail. The world around him faded, leaving only the words and images, the stories of people who had lived, struggled, and survived. He felt a deep connection to his grandmother, a bond that had been hidden beneath the soil and now stretched across generations. It was an overwhelming feeling, a mix of grief, admiration, and wonder. At some point, he realized that he couldn't keep the discovery to himself. The contents of the coffin were not just personal mementos, they were pieces of history, glimpses into lives that had been shaped by courage, fear, and love. He needed to share this, but carefully. There was a responsibility in holding these secrets, a duty to honor the lives and stories that had been preserved for so long. The letters and diary were fragile, and he handled them with the care of someone touching history itself. As the day passed, he began to take notes, copying down important names, dates, and events. He wanted to make sure he didn't miss anything. Each item seemed to open another door, revealing more layers of his grandmother's life. One photograph led to a letter, one letter led to another name, and each connection created a web of stories that stretched across time. He realized that this was more than a personal discovery. It was a map of a hidden world, a world his grandmother had navigated with bravery and precision. By late afternoon, he felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The diary and letters had given him so much to think about, so many questions to ask, and yet he felt closer to his grandmother than he ever had in life. He could almost hear her voice in the careful, deliberate way she had written, guiding him, encouraging him, and warning him at the same time. The discovery had transformed his ordinary garden into a place of wonder and reflection, a place where the past and present met in ways he had never expected. He decided to leave the coffin open for a while, wanting to return later and continue exploring its contents. As he stood up and stretched, he felt the weight of the discovery pressing on him. It was not a heavy burden exactly, but it was a reminder that the past carries power, that history is alive in ways we often fail to notice. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, and he felt a sense of both peace and urgency. There was more to uncover, more to understand, and he knew that this was just the beginning of a journey he could not yet fully comprehend. That evening, he sat by the kitchen window, looking out at the garden. The old oak tree stood quietly in the fading light, its roots hiding secrets beneath the soil. He thought about the life of his grandmother, the risks she had taken, and the stories she had left behind. He felt a profound respect for her, for the courage she had shown in ways that had gone unnoticed for decades. And he felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was now a guardian of these secrets, a keeper of a hidden history that demanded care, attention, and understanding. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with dreams of letters and photographs, of people whose lives he was only beginning to understand. When he woke the next morning, the coffin and its contents were the first thing on his mind. He knew he could not ignore them, could not treat them as mere curiosity. There was a purpose here, a reason these items had been buried and preserved, and he was determined to discover it, to uncover the full story, and to honor the life and courage of the grandmother he thought he knew, but who had now revealed herself as something extraordinary. The following days were a mix of careful examination and reflection. He sorted the letters by date, carefully noting each detail. He photographed the old photographs for reference, making sure to preserve the originals. Each discovery led to new questions, and each answer seemed to open yet another layer of the story. He found himself speaking aloud at times, sharing thoughts with his grandmother as if she were there with him, guiding him through the maze of history she had left behind. The experience was surreal, intimate, and profoundly moving. He realized that this discovery had changed him. His perspective on life, on family, and on courage had shifted. The garden was no longer just a place to relax or dig in the soil. It was a place of revelation, a place where hidden truths could surface and reshape one's understanding of the world. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to follow the story wherever it led, and a recognition that the past, when uncovered, has the power to illuminate the present in ways that are both challenging and inspiring. As the week went on, he began to notice details in the garden he had never seen before. The roots of the oak tree seemed more intricate, the soil more alive, and the air more filled with possibility. It was as if the discovery of the coffin had awakened the garden itself, turning it into a space where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexisted. And through it all he felt the presence of his grandmother in a new way, not as the quiet figure of memory, but as a living influence, a guide whose courage and insight had transcended time to reach him in the present moment. He knew that this was only the beginning. There were more letters to read, more photographs to study, and more stories to uncover. And with each step, he felt a growing connection to the past, to his family, and to the life that had been hidden beneath the soil for so many years. The discovery of the coffin had changed everything, opening a door to a world he had never imagined, and inviting him to step inside and explore the mysteries his grandmother had left behind. Days passed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the coffin in his garden was more than just a collection of old letters and photographs. Each time he stepped outside, his eyes drifted toward the oak tree as if it held the answers to questions he hadn't yet learned to ask. The diary and letters had given him glimpses into his grandmother's life, but they also hinted at things he didn't fully understand. There were gaps, moments that seemed deliberately left unsaid, as though she had trusted him to discover the meaning for himself. He felt a sense of both excitement and responsibility. He decided to go back to the diary, flipping carefully to the pages he had only skimmed before. The handwriting was as precise as ever, but the words carried a weight he hadn't noticed at first. His grandmother had chronicled experiences that were not only personal, but connected to the lives of others, people whose names had long been forgotten. She wrote about helping strangers, making arrangements that would protect them from danger, and doing so quietly without recognition or reward. It became clear to him that she had lived a life of extraordinary courage, hidden beneath the calm and familiar face he had always known. One letter caught his attention more than the others. It was addressed to someone named only with initials, and it spoke of a secret meeting place where important items were kept safe. The handwriting was urgent, almost fearful, but also precise and determined. He felt a chill as he realized the letter was likely written during a time of great danger, when a wrong word could have cost lives. There was a sense of urgency in every line, as if the writer knew that discovery might not come for decades, and yet had taken care to leave just enough information for the right person to understand. He sat in the garden for hours, piecing together connections between the diary and the letters. A photograph of a small building in the countryside seemed to match the description in the letter. Another photograph showed a group of people he did not recognize, their faces smiling, yet his grandmother's expression hinted at worry. He wondered who these people were and what had become of them. Every discovery pulled him deeper into a story that had been carefully hidden from the world, a story that now belonged to him to uncover. As he examined the items, he noticed a small wooden box tucked into the corner of the coffin. Its surface was worn and the latch had rusted over the years, but it opened with careful effort. Inside were more letters tied together with a faded ribbon and a small key. He turned it over in his hands, wondering what it might unlock. There was a note with the key written in his grandmother's handwriting, but the words were cryptic, It spoke of finding the place where the past sleeps, of unlocking what was meant to remain hidden, and of trusting the heart to guide the hand. The message was mysterious, but it felt purposeful, as though it were both a warning and an invitation. He realized that his grandmother's life had been far more complex than he had ever imagined. She had been involved in matters of trust, secrecy, and protection, far beyond anything he had known about her. It was humbling and frightening at the same time. The thought that he was now responsible for understanding and safeguarding these secrets made his chest tighten. It was no longer just a story from the past. It had become part of his life, and he felt the weight of that responsibility pressing down on him. That evening, he decided to visit the countryside to see if he could find the building from the photograph. The location was described vaguely in the letters, but there were hints that made him believe it was nearby, hidden in a small, quiet part of the region. The drive there was quiet, filled with the hum of the engine and the rhythmic passing of trees and fields. His mind wandered constantly to the diary, the letters, and the stories they contained. He tried to imagine his grandmother walking the same paths, making choices that could change the course of someone else's life, all while keeping her own identity hidden. When he arrived, the building was even more modest than he had imagined. It was small and worn, with ivy creeping along the walls and windows clouded with dust. The air around it felt heavy, almost as if it had been waiting for him. He approached carefully, feeling a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. This was more than just curiosity. It was a connection to his grandmother, to a hidden past that now demanded attention. He looked around for signs of anything unusual, but the building appeared abandoned, untouched for years. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important lay inside. Using the small key from the coffin, he unlocked a hidden compartment near the back of the building. Inside were more letters and documents, carefully preserved in envelopes that had protected them from time. He felt his hands tremble as he opened one, realizing that these were continuations of the stories he had found in the coffin. Each document revealed new details, names, dates, locations, and actions his grandmother had taken to safeguard lives. The letters were written with precision, conveying not only facts but emotion, the fear, determination, and hope that must have carried her through the most difficult moments. One letter spoke of a child she had helped protect, a child whose life had been in danger due to circumstances beyond anyone's control. Another described a family she had sheltered, providing them with food, clothing, and a safe place to stay. The level of planning and care that went into her actions amazed him. She had not acted impulsively. She had thought through every detail, considered every risk, and acted with both courage and compassion. The more he read, the more he realized that her bravery had shaped the lives of people he would never meet, people who owed their survival to her foresight and dedication. He also began to understand the sacrifices she had made. Many letters spoke of missed opportunities, of moments she could not attend, and relationships she could not fully embrace. There was a quiet loneliness in her words, a sense that she had carried the burden of these secrets alone. He felt a pang of sadness as he read, realizing that the woman he had always thought of as ordinary had lived a life filled with extraordinary responsibility. Her courage had come at a personal cost, and now, decades later, he was uncovering the extent of her sacrifices. As the day turned to evening, he packed up the letters and documents, making careful notes of their contents and locations. The drive back home was quiet, filled with reflection. The world outside the car felt the same as always. Yet he knew he had glimpsed something entirely different. A world of hidden courage, of decisions made in shadows, and of a life lived with quiet heroism. The discovery had changed his perspective on family, on responsibility, and on what it meant to be brave. Back home, he carefully placed the letters and documents on the table, spreading them out so he could examine them further. He realized that he needed a system, a way to piece together the stories and make sense of the timeline, the people, and the places involved. It was like solving a puzzle, each document a piece that revealed more of the bigger picture. He spent the evening organizing the materials, noting connections, and trying to understand the scope of his grandmother's actions. The process was both exhausting and exhilarating. As night fell, he looked out at the garden, the oak tree standing silently in the darkness. The coffin still rested beneath it, holding the items that had started this journey. He felt a sense of awe mixed with responsibility. The discovery had grown beyond a simple curiosity. It had become a mission. He was no longer just uncovering history. He was connecting with it, understanding it, and preparing to preserve it. The weight of the past pressed on him, but it was a weight he welcomed, because it brought him closer to the woman he had always loved and admired, in ways he had never known. In the following days, he continued to read and sort the letters and documents, uncovering new details with each passing hour. Some stories were joyful, others filled with tension and fear. Each one added depth to his understanding of his grandmother's life. He began to see patterns, to understand the logic behind her actions, and to appreciate the foresight and compassion that guided her decisions. The discovery was like a living story unfolding in real time, and he felt privileged to witness it. Through it all, he noticed a change in himself. The discovery of the coffin and the documents had altered the way he saw the world. He became more aware of the hidden layers in everyday life, of the untold stories that shape people's choices, and of the courage that often goes unnoticed. He began to understand that bravery is not always about grand gestures. It can be quiet, deliberate, and hidden, just as his grandmother's life had been. He also began to consider the impact of sharing these stories. They were not only about his grandmother, they were about the people she had helped and the lives she had touched. There was a responsibility in handling these stories carefully, in honoring the truth without causing harm or misunderstanding. He knew that one day he might share them, but for now he needed to understand them fully, to piece together the narrative and grasp the meaning behind every decision, every letter and every photograph. By the end of the week, he had created a rough timeline of events, mapping out the letters, diary entries, and documents. The picture that emerged was one of courage, foresight, and quiet heroism. His grandmother had lived a life that few could imagine, making choices that shaped the future for people she might never meet. And he realized that discovering her story had changed him as well. He felt a deeper connection to family, to history, and to the idea that one person's actions can have ripple effects far beyond what they can ever see. He knew there were more discoveries to be made. The coffin, the letters, and the documents were just the beginning. There were still questions to answer, stories to uncover, and mysteries to solve. And yet he felt a quiet confidence. He had begun to understand the logic, the care, and the courage behind his grandmother's choices. He knew that step by step, he could uncover the full story and honor the life she had led, a life hidden in plain sight for decades. The garden, the oak tree, and the coffin had become symbols of this journey. A journey not just into the past, but into understanding, respect, and connection. And as he closed the diary and looked out at the fading light, he felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just the caretaker of a garden. He was the keeper of a legacy, entrusted with the task of bringing a hidden story to light and preserving the courage of a woman who had lived in shadows, but whose actions now shone brightly in his understanding. After the week he had spent examining the letters and photographs, he realized that the story he was uncovering was bigger than he had imagined. Each day, as he sorted through the documents and cross-referenced dates and names, he discovered connections he hadn't noticed before. Some of the letters revealed relationships between people in the town that he had never understood. Others described events that had shaped his grandmother's life in ways that no one had talked about. The depth of her actions, her courage, and the careful thought she had put into every decision amazed him. He started to notice patterns. Certain names kept appearing, certain locations kept reappearing, and some stories seemed to continue across decades. It was clear that his grandmother had been more than just a quiet figure in the family. She had been part of something significant, something that had affected more lives than anyone had realized. He began to understand that discovering her story was not just about honoring her memory. It was about uncovering a hidden chapter of the town's history. A chapter that had quietly shaped people's lives without anyone realizing it. Word of the discovery began to spread, though slowly at first. He spoke to a few neighbors, casually mentioning that he had found old family letters and photographs. They were curious, and soon enough, more people wanted to know what he had found. He hesitated at first, unsure how much to reveal. The documents were personal, and yet they also contained important historical information. He realized that sharing them could uncover forgotten stories and help people understand the past in a new way. But it could also upset some families who had been involved in the events described. He decided to invite a few people he trusted to his home. He showed them the letters, photographs, and diary, carefully explaining what he had found without giving away too much too quickly. Their reactions were a mix of amazement, curiosity, and disbelief. Some people were moved to tears as they recognized names of relatives or neighbors who had been part of the stories. Others were fascinated by the bravery and careful planning that his grandmother had demonstrated. For the first time, he saw how much impact her actions had had, and how much influence a single person's courage could have on an entire community. As more people became involved, he realized that the discovery had the potential to change how the town remembered its past. Stories that had been forgotten or misunderstood were coming back to life, and people were beginning to see the events of decades ago in a new light. He felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. This was not just about uncovering family history. It was about helping the town understand its own story, and he knew that he had to approach it carefully and respectfully. He began to work with a local historian, someone who could help him document the letters and photographs in a way that preserved their meaning and context. Together, they began to trace the events described in the letters, visiting old buildings, checking town records, and talking to people who had lived through parts of the story. Each step revealed more details, more connections, and more proof of his grandmother's careful planning and bravery. It became clear that she had been a quiet force behind many events, shaping outcomes without anyone knowing her involvement. Some of the letters revealed moments of tension and danger that he had not fully understood before. One described a night when his grandmother had hidden a family in her home, risking everything to keep them safe. Another described a secret meeting where important decisions had been made to protect lives during difficult times. Reading these letters, he felt a deep sense of admiration. He could almost picture her, calm but determined, making choices that could have changed everything if anything had gone wrong. The weight of her bravery settled on him, and he realized how much courage she must have carried in her heart every day. At the same time, he began to feel the pressure of responsibility. The letters and photographs were fragile, both physically and emotionally. Each one contained personal stories, and he knew that mishandling them could damage not only the documents, but also the memories and trust of the people involved. He became meticulous in his approach, photographing everything, creating detailed notes, and making sure that each document was preserved. The more he worked, the more he understood that he was not just uncovering history, he was becoming part of it. As he organized the documents, he also began to uncover parts of his grandmother's personality that he had never known. The diary revealed moments of humor, kindness, and reflection. She wrote about small joys, the beauty of everyday life, and the satisfaction of helping others. He realized that her courage was not just about facing danger. It was about living with integrity, compassion, and thoughtfulness, even when no one was watching. He felt a deep connection to her, understanding that her influence had extended far beyond what anyone had realized. He also began to notice the impact of these discoveries on himself. He was more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the stories that might be hidden in his own life and the lives of those around him. The letters had reminded him that everyone carries unseen histories, and that understanding these stories can change the way we see the world. He started to appreciate small acts of kindness, moments of bravery, and quiet decisions that can have far-reaching consequences. In many ways, he felt that uncovering his grandmother's story had taught him how to live more consciously and with greater empathy. One day, while reviewing the documents, he discovered a letter that seemed almost like a message meant specifically for him. It spoke of the importance of remembering, of honoring the past while moving forward, and of sharing knowledge carefully. The handwriting was gentle but firm, almost like guidance from someone who had thought deeply about the future. Reading it, he felt a mixture of sadness and inspiration. It was as if his grandmother had known that he would find the letters and photographs, and had prepared him for the responsibility that came with that discovery. The more he delved into the story, the more he realized that his grandmother's actions had ripple effects he could barely measure. Families had been saved, relationships preserved, and communities strengthened because of her careful planning. Yet she had never sought recognition or reward. Her life had been one of quiet service, filled with courage that only now, decades later, was being understood. He felt a profound sense of gratitude and respect, not just for her, but for the idea that one person's choices can influence many lives in ways that are invisible until much later. As he continued to share parts of the story with trusted neighbors and historians, he noticed something remarkable. People began to tell their own stories, memories that had been tucked away for years. These accounts confirmed some of the details in the letters and added new perspectives. The discovery of the coffin and its contents had created a chain reaction, encouraging others to reflect on the past and share their experiences. The town, which had seemed quiet and ordinary, began to feel alive with history, with stories waiting to be remembered and understood. He realized that this journey was changing not only his understanding of his grandmother, but also the understanding of everyone around him. The documents, letters, and photographs were more than just artifacts. They were keys to understanding the lives and choices of people who had come before. Each piece he uncovered added depth to the picture of the past, and each story reminded him that history is not just a collection of dates and events, but a living web of human experiences, courage, and compassion. The work was exhausting both mentally and emotionally. Some nights he could barely sleep, thinking about the letters and photographs, imagining the people involved, and considering the implications of the stories. Other nights he felt exhilarated, thrilled by the connection to a past that had been hidden for so long. He understood that he was walking a delicate line, honoring the past, preserving its meaning, and sharing it carefully without disrupting the lives of those who were still living. Through it all, he felt a growing sense of fulfillment. The journey had been challenging, at times emotionally exhausting, but it had also been deeply rewarding. He had learned about his grandmother's life, connected with the past, and helped others understand the history of their community. The letters and diary had revealed courage, thoughtfulness, and integrity in a world that often overlooked quiet heroism. And he realized that his own life had been enriched by the experience, that he had grown in understanding, empathy, and purpose because of the discovery. One evening, as the sun began to set, he sat in the garden with the coffin open, carefully reviewing the letters one last time before returning them to their resting place. The light filtered through the leaves of the oak tree, casting patterns across the grass. He felt a sense of peace. The story was no longer hidden, yet it remained private and respected, preserved in a way that honored his grandmother's intentions. He closed the coffin gently, feeling the weight of the past, the care of the present, and the hope for the future all in one moment. He realized that the coffin had changed everything, not just his understanding of his grandmother, but his understanding of life, family, and responsibility. The discovery had shown him that courage is often quiet, that love and care can be expressed in ways that leave lasting impact, and that the past can guide the present if we take the time to listen. He felt gratitude for the trust his grandmother had placed in him, for the opportunity to uncover her story, and for the lessons it had taught him. In the following weeks, he shared the story carefully with a few trusted people outside the family, those who could help preserve the history and ensure that it was not forgotten. They admired the courage and thoughtfulness evident in the letters and diary. Some of them contributed additional context, helping to connect the dots and illuminate parts of the story that he had not fully understood. The work became a collaborative effort, a way to honor the past while ensuring that it continued to inspire and educate in the present. As he reflected on the journey, he realized that the discovery had not just been about the coffin or its contents, it had been about understanding life in its complexity. His grandmother had shown him that courage, love, and wisdom can exist quietly, without recognition, yet still have a profound impact. The letters, photographs, and diary had been her way of communicating across time, leaving guidance and insight for someone she trusted. And he had learned that the responsibility of discovering such a legacy is both an honor and a call to action. The garden returned to its usual quiet beauty, but he never saw it the same way again. Every corner, every tree, and every patch of soil seemed alive with memory. The oak tree, in particular, became a place of reflection, a reminder that the past and present are intertwined, and that even hidden stories have the power to shape our lives. Sitting beneath it, he could almost feel the presence of his grandmother, her courage and wisdom surrounding him like a quiet, steady force. Finally, he felt ready to step back and appreciate what had been accomplished. The letters, photographs, and diary were preserved and documented. The story of his grandmother's courage and careful planning had been uncovered and shared with those who could help honor it. And he understood that the journey was not just about the past. It was about how we live in the present and what we choose to carry forward into the future. He closed the coffin one last time. Resting it gently beneath the oak tree, the discovery had changed everything, and yet it had also brought clarity and peace. The past had been revealed, the story preserved, and a legacy honored. And as he stood in the fading light, he felt a sense of completion, knowing that he had done justice to the life and courage of the woman who had lived quietly, bravely, and wisely, leaving behind a story that would inspire and guide for generations to come.